Ladies and gentlemen, you are tuned into another episode of the Paul Leslie Hour. And now your host, Paul Leslie.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're welcoming back Mac McAnally. Mac is a great singer-songwriter, recording artist. He is one of the most respected musicians and singer-songwriters around. In fact, he's the recipient of 10 Musician of the Year awards from the Country Music Association. As a recording artist, he's released his 14th studio album, Once in a Lifetime, on Mailboat Records. And just as a disclaimer, folks, this interview is being done in the year 2020. If you want to dig up the last time Mac McAnally was on the Paul Leslie Hour, which was recorded backstage at the Roswell Cultural Arts Center, look up episode number 144. So, Mr. McAnally, how does it go?
It seems like somebody asked Vassar Clemens that about a fiddle tune one time. It goes pretty well for me, Paul. This particular piece of time that we're navigating right now is it's troubled waters for most everybody. But I do realize that I'm kind of doubly blessed in that my job is something I can entertain myself with. Whether or not I can do it, we can't go out on the road and play shows right now. But there's a bunch of musical instruments laying around the house, and I've got music that runs around in my head. So it serves to entertain me during the time when we can't do much of anything else. And music's a lucky thing to be involved in anyway. It's one of the few things in the world that can turn bad into good. And since the world has supplied a little extra bad this year, I want to try to supply a little extra music.
Well, what would you say has helped you the most in coping with the reality of life in this year?
Well, music as much as anything, because as it just turned out, just the happenstance of this particular year. You may well know I'm a member of the Coral Reefer Band with Jimmy Buffett during we call that my day job, which is a pretty good day job. I recommend that to anybody. But in January of this year, before the pandemic got up and rolling, we recorded tracks for Jimmy's new studio album, first one in 7 years. And I am, along with Mike Utley, our keyboard player and musical director, I am the producer on Jimmy's records. And so we had a bunch of work to do, overdubs and background vocals and mixing, that sort of the finished carpentry that goes along with making records these days. And so that occupied the first chunk of time. And I also I had recorded the basic tracks of my record, and I had the same process to go through on my CD or album or whatever you'd like to call it, according to what period of the last century you come from. But those two records pretty much occupied me all the way through May. So the first part of the pandemic was actually I was getting to work in studios, and I'm very blessed to have a studio environment down in Muscle Shoals and a small one here in Nashville where I am today as well. So finishing those records was the most entertaining part of the first of the year. And then since then, I've done some odds and ends for everybody else, but I haven't got to hug my kids, but I've gotten to be home and around the kids more than usual, because we're always on the road this time of the year. Mr. Buffett has never not toured in his adult life. And this is the first year in about 26 or 7 that I haven't been out, in the summertime with the Coral Reefers. So it's new, but I do realize how fortunate I am to have music as a job, and it makes me feel for all the people who can't work and who want to, and B, all the people who kind of have to work because they're either essential as first responders or healthcare professionals, or even the people handing out the sodas at the drive-through windows at fast food. They're essential workers, and they have to work and have some risk involved in going. So I'm grateful to what everybody's doing, and I'm rooting for everybody to weather it together.
What would you say I think we can look at 2020 and find that there are blessings to it if we look. What would you say the blessing of this year has been for you?
Well, I speak occasionally of miscounted blessings in songs, and the title of my record this year is called Once in a Lifetime, and it's something that I say periodically, but this year has made it more clear than ever, is that every day really is once in a lifetime. A lot of people tend to just lower their head, whether it's a work week, they say, okay, I got to make it till Friday and get the work over with, and they just plow through Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And in reality, there's a lot of good things that happen on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and Thursday. And this 2020 has been a tough year. There's a lot of folks just saying, I just want to get through this year. And I understand that, but there's good things that can happen in this year. You just because it's generally gloomy doesn't mean there's not really pockets of good. And I think historically, the arts community has always there's always been great art that's born out of pressurized time. This is a high pressure piece of time, but there'll be great music and visual art and literature that comes from this piece of time that nobody in our lifetime has been through anything like this year. So I expect some art to come out of it that hasn't been duplicated in our lifetime, and I look forward to that. My particular blessing is the fact that I'm not usually home. I have my kids around me now, and I can do things. Although I can't hug them, I can spend time with family in a way that I don't usually get to in the work environment in the summer, and that's it for me. And two of my kids, unfortunately, have gone through the virus, but fortunately have survived it pretty well. And I count those things as blessings because they have some immunity and can go back to work and feel pretty confident now, I think, at least for a couple of years.
Since you mentioned your children and the Buffett record, I have to say, and I told her this, I think the absolute knockout on the newest Jimmy Buffett record, Life on the Flip Side, is the last song on the album, which your daughter co-wrote.
Isn't that something? And it's just such a cool human story because, like I said, Mr. Utley and I Mike Utley and I are the co-producers of the record, and his oldest son Mick married my oldest daughter Erin, so we have second generation coral reefers, and as you say, Paul, the last song on the record they co-wrote with Jimmy, and that's just there's all kinds of beautiful circle of life stories, but this is a particularly good one for us because those kids, since they were kids, they were out on the road with us, and we would book little museum trips for the band children to go to and everything. So they've been really close friends forever, and then all of a sudden they're married and they're family, and Utley and I were co-producers, but we also call ourselves the co-daddies because we got these kids, and they're such great kids, both of them. And our standard line it's a standard line, but it's true, is that both of those kids improve both families. They're really great kids.
Well, I'm hoping we can talk about the title track of this album, Once in a Lifetime. When I first heard it, I thought, wow, this sounds very, very different from a lot of the stuff you've recorded. So tell us about that song, Once in a Lifetime, where you're joined by Drake White.
Yeah, and Drake's a phenomenal singer and just such a sweetheart guy, great writer, great entertainer. And he's from North Alabama. My studio's down in Muscle Shoals, and Muscle Shoals has sort of been musical home to me since the late 70s. So I think I went there in 76, and we became friends relative to that, but and have recorded some together, although we had never written together. We just talked about it. But Drake and I just ran into one another at breakfast at a restaurant here in the neighborhood where I live in Nashville, and we weren't planned on meeting. I just saw him 3 or 4 tables across, and after we finished breakfast, I walked by and shook hands, which you could do back in the early part of 2020, And he said, "Man, what's going on, man?" And it's one of my standard lines. I said, "Oh man, every day's great. Every day is once in a lifetime." I said that, and Drake said, "Ooh, we should write that, or at least you should write it." And it's one of those things I would have just said and kept on going and not paid any attention to it. But he recognized that it had a little juice to it, and so we made an appointment and we got together. And you're right, it is a little bit different than standard for me. And Drake's got such a broad range. I don't feel limited by range. We started goofing around talking about that title, and I had just bought a new instrument called a Griffin, which is it's like a 12-string, but it's tuned up really high. It probably has enough tension in the strings to shoot an arrow 1.5 miles, but for some reason or other, it's fun, and it's fun to play, and because it's tuned up so high, it throws your voice into a different place when you start trying to sing to it. And we just started a little back and forth. That chorus, he started singing, that every day's once in a lifetime, and I started doing answers to it, sort of like, kind of like the Beatles did in Getting Better All the Time. He said every day's once in a lifetime, and I go, it's once in a lifetime every day. We just started back and forth, and it was fun, and it took about 45 minutes to write. It just fell really easily. And that's not always a great sign, but it frequently is a great sign. And it just seems like it has a lot of joy in it. And I was raised in church, gospel music and everything, and the whole biblical make a joyful noise thing has always applied to me. I try to be, I don't want to say I'm a glass half full guy. I'm probably a glass 3/4 full guy. I'm a fairly optimistic fellow. And we didn't write this song to deal specifically with this, pandemic, this particular year, but I do think that it is well equipped to add a little sunshine to this particular year that a lot of people, so many folks, are struggling through. Every day has a chance to be good, to be better than yesterday was, and I actually think that it's better to look at it that way. My whole directive every day is to get better. I want to be a better guitar player and a better singer, and Lord knows there's room for improvement, better songwriter. And every day is an opportunity to do that. I want to be a better father to my daughters and neighbor to my neighbors and a better ex-husband to my ex-wife. I want to get better. And every day is a chance to do that.
Well, on the note of collaborating, you have a few co-writers on this album. Drake White, Jimmy Buffett, Will Kimbrough, Roger Guth. What do you look for in someone that you work with?
Well, over the years, Paul, I've actually been primarily a solo writer, and it's not because I never wanted to be a co-writer. I'm such a bashful guy. I grew up on a farm, and we were sort of taught not to call attention to ourselves, and that was a bad character trait to call attention to yourself. And so it's a little bit ironic that you end up in show business for 5.5 decades so far. But it's just worked out that the concentration level I like to be at historically has been me writing by myself. But as I get to be friends with people, there becomes what I call assignment writing. Like, Jimmy and I have been friends a long time, and we've written together a lot for his records. And the song that's on this album, Changing Channels, is a song we wrote for his Off to See the Lizard album. And he did a great version of it. He killed that song, and I never thought there would be a reason for me to record it. But I really like it. So I sit and play it sometimes, and every once in a while I'll play it in one of my little solo shows. And his fan base is so great about supporting the other Coral Reefers when we go out and do our smaller listening room type gigs. Sometimes I'll play that song for them, and they'll come up after the show and they'll go, "Which one of your CDs has Changing Channels on it?" And I was like, I never recorded it. I didn't think there was a reason to after Jimmy did. He did such a good job. And they go, "No, we like you singing it too. You should record it as well." So as bad a businessman as I am, it eventually got through my head that some of them would like to hear that. in my live show, I always perform that song. The last 5 or 6 years, my show has just been me and Eric Darkin on percussion, the two of us. And the core of this record, like 9 tracks out of the 12, are just Eric and myself. And that's the way we do it live, just him on a cajon, beating on a wooden box, and me with my little wooden box with 6 strings on it, and the two of us play it. And I think I put some harmony on it, but it's very simple production of a beautiful song that I'm grateful that Jimmy and I wrote. Will Kimbrough and I wrote the song Just Right. We were writing for Jimmy's album, and we liked that song, but it didn't end up ideal for Jimmy's record. But we cut a track on it while we were down in Key West cutting Jimmy's record, and he allowed me to borrow that track for my record because it was so good. It's got the whole Coral Reefer Band plus Will Kimbrough, and Will's such a great writer in his own right. I've been a fan of his for a long time, and he's a great friend as well. So the co-writing comes from friendship, and Roger Guth, our drummer in the Coral Reefer Band, is also a great songwriter in his own right. And the song that we wrote, it's called Good Guys Win. It was project written. It was written for a film that we did some soundtrack work for called Hoot. A friend of ours, Carl Hyacin, wrote a novel called Hoot, and they made a movie of that Jimmy was involved in. And he sang that song in the film. It was the song at the end of the movie that sort of wrapped it up. And it served a purpose well there. And once again, it was written maybe 2007. And I was thinking, there wasn't any reason, like Changing Channels, there was no reason for me to ever record it, but people would come and request it, and we don't ever play it in the Coral Reefer show. And this particular piece of time it seemed like a good time to bring that one out as well. A few folks had been asking for it. So most of these songs on the record are new, but in maybe 3 or 4 cases, there's a couple that have been sitting around a while that I either thought I didn't need to record because somebody else had already done a good version, or for whatever reason. Well, the song Brand New Broken Heart that's on the record, also, I wrote that to pitch to one of my bluegrass buddies like Ricky Skaggs or somebody that's really authentic in that world, I imagine should cut that song. But I just am too lazy and I'm too bashful to go knock on somebody's door and say, you should, or maybe you should check this out and record it. So it sat around for 10 years, and eventually I really like that song. I think I'm going to go ahead and sing it myself. And so there's different ways to arrive at putting a record together, but I enjoy all of those ways. And I don't poo-poo any of them. I think, however you arrive at good music and music that makes you happy to play and proud to claim, however you get to there is a good thing.
I do think the interpretation here of your co-write Changing Channels, it's a really interesting version. I really like it. What would you say Jimmy Buffett's greatest talent is?
That's tough because he's got so many. His manager, his late great manager, Howard Kaufman, used to say that, if Jimmy weren't such a good writer and weren't such a good entertainer and musician, that he would be a great CEO because he has a great eye for good people. And his organization, top to bottom, and I'm a little biased because they're like second family to me. Our touring group, all of the whole Margaritaville Holdings, all the people that work with Jimmy, he's just run across and assembled really good people. And it's not always like, hey, this guy's a great carpenter, he's going to be a great set carpenter for us on the road. It's just literally, this guy's a good person. I want this person to work with me in some way or other. And then you find out what we're good at later. And the whole organization's built of people like that. So I would say, although he's obviously known, he's an underrated writer because he's such a good entertainer. People don't give him credit for the writing that he does. But there's not really anything that he's not pretty good at. But his assembling of people and leading a group of people, a lot of folks might not know that's a great gift of his, but I think that's one of his best talents, and it goes unknown for the most part. So I've got to brag on that a little bit.
Well, it was just the other day I was watching one of the little snippets that he does on Facebook, which I recommend, by the way. And he was talking about a song of yours that you co-wrote with him that I happen to think is a vastly underrated song. He says he's working up a version of Love in the Library. And
yeah.
great song, and I'm hoping that maybe you could just talk a little bit about it.
Well, happy to. Yes, there was a little time in the early '90s where Jimmy bought a place and moved back to Nashville because musically he's always connected really well with Nashville, but as it turns out, he connects so much with saltwater. It's not ever going to be, as cool of a town as Nashville is. There's no saltwater around, so it's not going to be the place that he lives permanently. But he came back to Nashville for a while, and we were writing songs for the Fruitcakes album. And our songwriting usually gets born out of sitting on a porch and talking about things that we have in common. The first song we ever wrote was "The Coast is Clear," and that was about going to hang out after the tourists clear out down at the Gulf. We both grew up with access to the Gulf of Mexico, and that was the first thing that we had in common that we talked about. But both coming from Mississippi and both being sort of students of Southern literature and very strongly influenced by literature in general, that popped up in our conversation, and Love in the Library was born out of that. The whole notion of finding somebody around a bunch of books that you revere, that you end up revering the person as well. And I appreciate that. That's obviously, I guess you would call it a niche song, because it's not for everybody, but the people that connect with that song, it's a deep connection, and I really like that. And I like the fact that in the context of being a big universal type act, that Jimmy will go down deep dive and work hard on something that has a smaller cast as an audience, but as I say, it means a lot to the folks that it connects with.
Very well put. Well, you've had your songs recorded by people from great classic singers like Charlie Pride to more contemporary acts like Kenny Chesney. Who do you think has done the best job of cutting one of your songs or performing one of your songs?
Well, gosh, I've been really blessed in so many different ways, and it is hard to pick one. The first big hit that I got to be a co-writer on was "Old Flame" for Alabama, and when I think about what that did for them and for me, for where we were at the time, that probably had as much impact as anything that I've ever been involved in, and it was unexpected. At that time, there wasn't a lot of country music that was being done in out of Muscle Shoals, and my publishing deal was in Muscle Shoals at Wishbone. We worked at Wishbone Studio, and Donnie Lowry, who's one of my best friends, he and I wrote that song together, and we finished it on the night John Lennon was assassinated. I remember exactly the little moment of silence in Monday Night Football, because we had just wrapped up that song and walked in there and turned on the TV, and that's what hit. But at any rate, we were just above eating government cheese out of necessity. We still ate it occasionally out by choice, but we were struggling to be lower middle class and didn't have any great prospects, and honestly, at that time the guys in Muscle Shoals were thinking, well, why would you even write a country song? Because number one records only sell like 40,000 copies or whatever. These were music professionals that were telling us we were wasting our time writing country songs. And I said, well, I just like it. Some of my heroes are country singers, so I'm going to write what I like, whether it's feasible or not. And then here comes Alabama, and between then and now, Old Flame has somebody told me it's over 25 million sales. So whoever told me 40,000 was the ceiling was off. They were a little bit off on that one. But honestly, that's not anything I would ever do based on money anyway. I only write songs that light me up. That's the only thing I love it when someone asks for something. And I would say probably that one was a total surprise. So that's probably the biggest impact for me. But the band Shenandoah also, I played on their early records, and Marty Rabin, the fabulous lead singer of Shenandoah, he said, "Mac, you know my voice. Write something for my voice." And nobody had ever asked me that before. And we came up with 24 Roses for Marty, and that record still sounds great today. I hear it on the radio occasionally, and I went, "Man, we really lucked out," because it sounds better than I know for a fact that I am. So there's luck involved in that, and so somewhere between those two would probably be my favorite cuts. But I've had so many. Kenny did a great cut of Back Where I Come From, and Jimmy did a great cut of It's My Job, and Sawyer Brown. We had a great run with Sawyer Brown when Mark just sang a whole bunch of my stuff, and we wrote a bunch of stuff together. So it's hard to pick one and not feel like I'm insulting some others, because I've been so lucky and so blessed.
This question is perhaps somewhat philosophical, but given the tone of the album and the tone of so many of your songs, I feel like it's fair. Mr. McAnally, what is the best way to live?
Well, I think, and I'm not somebody who tries to solicit agreement from anybody else. I have my own thoughts. I don't proselytize. I don't think anybody has to think like I think, but I believe that life is a gift, and that whatever life you have, as good or bad as it is, whatever, if you have a terminal disease and you got 6 weeks left to live, life is still the best thing that you have. And if it's not a responsibility to enjoy it, it is at least an opportunity to enjoy it. And I think that the world is better off when people enjoy the gift of life. And if you can figure out a way to enjoy it that is not at the direct expense of somebody else that's trying to enjoy theirs too, then that's it. Then that's what life, that's as good as it can be. I grew up in a great little small community in Mississippi where it was in our mindset to consider making life better for folks around us. And I happen to like that. I happen to like that thought. It makes me sleep good at night. It makes me feel better when I wake up in the morning. If I know that in my heart and in the actions of my day, I'm going to try to make my life a little bit better right after I try to make somebody else's a little bit better. And I grew up, my parents were great examples for that attitude. And I consider myself, I actually aspire to be a watered down version of my parents, because they were such wonderful people. And if when I die, they say he's a watered down version of his mom and dad, then I'm going to take that as a compliment, because I grew up in a really fine family, and I know not everybody does, but the fact that's a particular blessing of mine makes me want to pass along some of the good things that they handed down to me.
I want all the listeners out there, please check out MacMcAnally.com. You can also visit the record label, MailboatRecords.com. Mac McAnally, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. I've had several of these exchanges with you, and they're always insightful and enjoyable for me.
Well, I appreciate what you do, Paul, and I appreciate the opportunity. You've known me well enough to know that I'm especially poor self-promoter, so any help that I get from the outside world, I am quite grateful for. And thank you for thinking of me over the years, because we've been at this a while now. You named the episode. I don't know how long ago it was we taped our first one, but it was not in the last 3 months, I know. It was a while back.
But I don't know if you remember this. Of course, I wouldn't be upset if you didn't. But years and years back, I wrote something called Semi-True Storyteller. It was a story about you I went out to the Variety Playhouse, and I remember I plopped this little junky cassette player down, and you said, "Let's make a table." And you pulled a chair, and we sat and we talked. I still remember that. It was
Not the Variety. How about that?
Yeah. It was such a joy it's been a joy to do this one as well.
Well, likewise, and I hope we get another turn on down the road.
Well, as I like to say, until next time. All right.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Paul Leslie Hour. Hosted, written, and produced by Paul Leslie. Intro theme song, Alexander's Ragtime Band, written by Irving Berlin, performed by Dan Barrett. Outro scatting G Things, improvised, performed, and produced by John Goodwin. Until next time.
Goodbye.